recording right away without even a test?
No testing, just go for it.
Damn, okay. We're talking about the Switch 2.
Did you watch the full Nintendo presentation?
Oh boy, I watched it. Not only did I watch it live at 6 a.m. Pacific time. It was the first thing I did when I woke up. I set an alarm.
So you must have been excited about some of the games, but why don't we go through just some of the specifics of the announcement?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the screen for a second. So the screen is a little bigger, just about 8 inches. The LCD versus OLED is kind of disappointing some folks. It's got 120 hertz. It's got HDR support.
Here's the thing though, when you talk to people, most people don't care. You own a Samsung Frame TV and you're happy with it. I cannot look at this thing without wanting to tear it off the wall, but you seem fine with it. A lot of people even really don't care about 120 hertz. My guess is that they were trying to keep the price as low as possible.
I played my Switch the majority of the time in docked mode, mainly because my Joy-Cons always had this weird issue.
Yeah, and the drifting.
And so I'm less concerned about the OLED because I'm playing on such a high quality TV. But I do think that there's also this interesting tension here where on one side you have this argument about something we haven't mentioned, which is the price point, right? It's starting at 450 US. And you have folks on one side saying, that's so expensive. And on the other side saying, oh, we want an OLED screen, which would just drive that price further. So I think when you look at what they're trying to balance, they're giving you tech to make the games feel better. They're optimizing for the dock and the handheld experience. I think with the hybrid console, you're always going to see those trade-offs. I think we saw that with the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is much better handheld, but when you dock it, it doesn't have as elegant of an experience as the Switch does.
Yeah. Let's talk about the price for a second. It's going to be $449, and sure, it comes with a dock. I think it's good value, but I think it passes that $400 just mental threshold. There's a psychology behind that. You can get a Steam Deck for $399. You can get a PlayStation for $399. You can get an Xbox Series S for $299. So it just proves that Nintendo is really confident about their IP and how much people love their games. This is very much the first time Nintendo did such a straight up sequel to a console. It's not really throwing everything out and starting from scratch. People were freaking out about the price, not only of the console itself, but also games going to $80 digital, $90 physical. But also it seemed like everything was being charged. Like you would get upgraded version of old games and that was for a fee.
They're charging for the tech demo. Yeah, they're charging for that. Learn what this console can do, but pay us to learn.
Secretly, everybody in the industry has been waiting for Nintendo to do that because a lot of these large studios are waiting to raise prices because the prices of video games haven't gone up with inflation.
I think Nintendo can get away with raising the price of the Switch 2 specifically. Games, let's table that for a moment. I have owned every Nintendo console since the NES, and I still own them, and they still work. And that includes the Wii U and the original Switch, which I bought on launch day. And aside from some issues with the Joy-Cons, it still works beautifully, and I never felt the need to upgrade it. I think that when you have a console that lasts 6, 7, 8 years, you can justify paying for it. Versus with PlayStation and Xbox, they're releasing updates to those consoles at the mid-cycle of life, right? You get a PS5, you're considering an upgrade to a PS5 Pro. It's not that their hardware isn't as reliable. It's just that when I buy a Nintendo, I don't expect to buy another console for almost a decade. So when you think about $450 and 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 years of fun, it's a lot easier to justify. The people are buying phones for $1,200, $1,500 that they expect to last a year. I think that there's just a little bit of a psychology gap when it comes to something that sits under your TV.
I bought my PlayStation 5 on release, and I think that's the box I'll keep until there's a new PlayStation. That's kind of a luxury purchase. I think what happens with Nintendo is that everybody in the household can agree. I think when it comes to PlayStation, maybe the kids want to play certain games, but parents don't have any memories of those games. But Nintendo is like all IP power now. You know, they're going to release a Zelda movie. The Super Mario movie did great. Their theme parks are doing great. Honestly, they could have done very little on that Switch 2. And some people have said that it's a better version of the Switch, which is what people want. I think that's the form factor that's here to stay for now in video gaming. Like, Steam Deck and those PC handheld consoles have like a tiny market share right now. I think that's only going to grow. I think that's going to be the battleground. I expect Xbox to do one with partners. I wouldn't be surprised if Sony announced something. That's the only way you compete with mobile. Like you said, you can't exist without a mobile phone, so you have to spend the money. Most people pay every month, so don't even notice. So it's hard to compete with that.
I think, just to your point, to kind of round out this idea, I think people buy Nintendo consoles differently than they buy other consoles. I think the majority of these are being bought for somebody else to play. A lot of people that I know bought the Switch for kids that are between the ages of 10 and 15. Those kids aren't buying consoles themselves. I think that that's the go-to console for the center of the family hub in a way that Nintendo's been able to solve beautifully, hardware and software, with new things like game sharing, with the options for like the C button and game chat. I think when you're buying a PS5, a lot of people are buying it for themselves. And I think that Sony could optimize a lot to do that and learn from Nintendo there.
It'll sell like crazy. Everybody will be buying this thing. I think that the tariffs ended up being higher than everybody expected. That's going to be rough for everyone. I think the game pricing thing is actually the bigger news, because the console will get cheaper over time and there's going to be competition there. But moving to $80 games, Super Mario Kart 8 sold 80 million copies, and then this new Super Mario Kart World that they announced will start at $80 for digital, $90 for physical.
I might be scorned for saying this, but a $60 video game in 2025, that is crazy. We are spoiled with Steam and the Steam sale because Nintendo stuff never drops in price, but I think that they can justify the spend. I'm more than happy to pay $80 for the new Donkey Kong and the new Mario Kart. I am not happy to pay more than maybe $10 to upgrade my games to this generation just to take advantage of like DLSS or something like that.
A lot of other game studios have kind of had to lean into loot boxes and microtransactions to try to make up for the revenue loss. 1991, when I bought my first console, which was the Super Nintendo or the Super NES, my favorite game was Super Mario World. And adjusted for inflation, that would be like $130 today, $120. And that was the price back then, $120. And you know what hasn't gone down is production costs. Making these games is more expensive than ever. Some would say like even 10x, 20 times the amount. So the price has technically gone down, but the production costs have gone up. That being said, we're talking about good games. There's a lot of games, AAA games that sell today that are not worth the $60. It feels really crappy for people to spend $60 on the game and then every 5 minutes being asked to spend more money.
There is a world, and I think Sony does this really well, and I think Nintendo, they have no incentive to do it, but first-party Sony games are released at a price that's valued. Take God of War, and it's at that price for a reasonable amount of time, but it does go on sale, and after 3 years, especially when the sequel is out, the original drops in price. And that brings more people into the franchise experience. Their philosophy around sales doesn't exist. The fact that Breath of the Wild, which is an incredible game, is still full price. It was a Wii U game, okay? That game was made for the...
So was Super Mario Kart 8.
No, it's deluxe, and you at least get the DLC. Yes,
yeah, you get the deluxe. And, I mean, there's this thing where everybody kind of always lag behind Netflix in raising prices, because Netflix is the only one that can raise prices. Netflix can come in. Some people might bounce, but they'll come tomorrow and say, hey, we'll raise price by $5, and people have to pay for it. Nintendo is that in gaming. They can set the prices, and then it's up to us to decide whether or not we want to buy it. I think it's going to be good to have more of a range of prices that you can sell games at. Yeah. Great for us. We want to build good value games between the $50, $20 to $30 range. It's good for us. We can show value. And also, get games on sale. And this is where Steam is great, right? Steam is really good for that. And so I think we have more choices, which is good.
It is the past 6 years or so that has given Nintendo that power. It was really the Switch, because before that, you wouldn't have said that about Nintendo in, 2015 or 2016.
The Wii was such a big seller, though. I mean,
and the Wii was also a value prop, though. The price point of the Wii and definitely Wii games brought a huge audience base. It was definitely geared towards much younger gamers, but
it was cheaper, and a lot of it was the Wii was also often called the second console, right? You would get an Xbox and a Wii, a PlayStation and a Wii, and that was their positioning. Totally. Now especially with the Switch 2, like this is your mainline console. You'll be able to play
100%.
Elden Ring on it.
Yeah.
Right? There's a new From Software release on it.
Let's talk about some of the stuff that we haven't addressed yet. One of the big innovations on this was the new C button and game chat functionality, which is basically Nintendo finally catching up and moving game chat out of their app and on screen in a kind of odd Zoom-like interface that pops down beneath your game.
I think it's great. Also, the demo showed realistic frame rates.
It did.
The demo showed realistic frame rates. Like it wasn't, and the sound was realistic, right? Usually when they show these demos, everybody's like perfectly lit and everything looks amazing. And this was like 12 frames a second.
They did show their audio processing where you're not using a mic. No one had headphones on. The mic is built into the console and the controller.
Yep.
Someone was in the background like making a smoothie and it filtered out that background noise, which would be a blessing. Okay, I think if they can, God, even Discord can't do it as well.
Yeah, we'll see how it works. I mean, if you look at the mic, it's just like a tiny little hole on the top of the Switch.
They've got some black magic going on.
Yeah.
Okay, the other big thing is finally they're getting deep learning super sampling, right? Which is going to allow them to upscale lower res textures, video trained on games, right? I heard that NVIDIA is making a custom graphics card specifically for Switch 2 that's taking into account power, it's taking into account the rest of the console specs. Based on what I've been seeing today from hands-on news and reviews around games like Breath of the Wild, which use this heavily, it works. Smooth frame rates, great in 4K, textures look really good. I'm really excited about seeing some of these games on a big TV because if you play Breath of the Wild, and I have it on Switch, it looks great because they leaned into it with the art style. But man, it's hard to go back to that when you're so used to playing games in 4K.
Although, once again, like a lot of people just don't care. I think it does look a lot better. I think Nintendo's always been so great at using the hardware, though. We were playing Tears of the Kingdom yesterday, and it's a miracle that this thing runs on the Switch, which is essentially a mid-range Android phone. The way Nintendo can push this stuff is crazy. The new one, the DLSS, it's great to see Breath of the Wild look better. Also, when are we going to get a Wind Waker remake? Because that's the one that they showed it running on the new GameCube emulator, which is exciting. But having a full remake would be amazing.
Wii U, man, I have it. Wind Waker HD. You come over and play it.
Do the Wii U. That's I want. The DLSS stuff is going to be super important for Nintendo because for the first time, the console is really ready for third-party title. It'll run Cyberpunk. It'll run Elden Ring. Yeah. That was always the thing. The Switch is great, but there's some games that you can only get on PC or Xbox or PlayStation. That's no longer the case.
We're going to start to see a lot of major third-party franchises that skip the Switch 1 arrive on Switch 2. And I think that's going to be incredible. Usually you waited, if a franchise came to the Switch, you waited 6 months or more until it was downscaled enough and reduced enough that it was functional, or they did it with game streaming. I think we're going to start to see day one third-party launch titles on Switch and maybe even exclusive to Switch for a period of time as a value prop for the system. And that's something that Nintendo has never had unless they release the games themselves.
We talk about like the third-party titles. There was a brand new From Software, which I don't know where they find the time.
It's called an Elden Ring expansion, but it wasn't exciting.
It looks like a Bloodborne expansion. Elden Ring's gonna play Hyrule Warriors, the new one, Deltarune Chapter 3 and 4, Hades 2. Okay, these would like all expect to run. Finally, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Cyberpunk.
Did you say Metal Gear Solid?
No, there's no Metal Gear.
There is. I saw Metal Gear Solid Delta.
Delta's coming up.
Unless
Hitman World of Assassination.
Hogwarts Legacy, and also they're re-releasing.
In like a 15-second clip, they confirmed that was the biggest news of the whole event.
Right?
Yeah, and people were thinking that it might be announced as a launch title, but there was very little fanfare. Anyway, I think the Switch ecosystem is going to keep positioning as the primary console that studios are going to want to target. I think the space looks like entirely PC-based, which I put Steam and Windows into, right? We're going to get more and more of these PC-based devices that maybe aren't big boxes, but are things that are portable. Both of these things is because of the collection. Like I have things on Steam that I bought 25 years ago that still run. And then Nintendo, there's all these games that I can only access there. It's really hard to be Sony or Microsoft right now.
It'll be interesting to see what it forces those companies to do. They're not great, but I think they should really look and evaluate how they're going to retain longtime customers and prevent them from jumping ship. Because right now there's very little. If you're on Steam, you're good. If you're a Nintendo fan, you'll buy the same game 3 times because you love it so much.
Yeah,
for Donkey Kong.
for sure. Speaking of Donkey Kong, are you excited?
Oh my God.
The best
Donkey
name
Kong
for
Bonanza.
Donkey Kong ever?
This game, I watched like 40 minutes of people. It looks like Super Mario Odyssey meets Deep Rock Galactic, and it is just every moment of gameplay is so satisfying. The way you're smashing rocks, the way you're collecting gems, the way they animated and rethought Donkey Kong as a character. He's this hero, he's an anti-hero, he's a goofball. I love it. The animation in this game is so expressive, and the gameplay, they've completely
90s.
rethought. It feels like everything I love from Donkey Kong 64, which is one of my favorite games of all time, infused with Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, which is one of my favorite games of all time. And the two of them never really sat together because one is this like 3D exploration game. The other is this fast-paced, like silky smooth. Managed to crack it and also bring in all the fun of destroying worlds, collecting gold. It looks like
great.
It's
Yeah,
so
looks
destructive.
amazing.
You can do anything. And they learned so much from Tears of the Kingdom with this idea of like, let's
It's
build a
open
world and
world,
see how
right?
you can take your own path to get anywhere. A couple of
Right.
levels. But there's so much soul and personality in this, which I think Nintendo's so good at. And that's why I feel like I want to give them $80. I'll probably give them $90 and buy the physical version of this game. It looks like a masterpiece, and it's one of the big reasons why I'm definitely going to get one by June 17th when that game launches.
I'm just shocked that Bonanza hadn't been used before. If I was making a Donkey Kong game, that would have been my first choice.
If they had to license it, or there was some like trademark issue because of Bonanza.
Oh, with the like 1950s TV.
You didn't mention, I don't want to derail us from games, but there's the Joy-Cons turn into mice.
Yeah, so
what do you
that's
think
great
about
for
that?
our
That's
game.
huge. Yeah.
I don't think there was like a demo that they showed that was super compelling outside of the Metroid Prime
First-person
demo,
controls with it look cool.
showing that you can use it like you would on a PC with mouse
Yeah.
and keyboard. It's going to be interesting to see what it feels to hold, and they're both mice, so you can have double mice. I think it's going to be fun to try this out for our game when it undoubtedly launches on Switch 2. I think our game kind of lends itself well to mouse controls. It's becoming the everything console, right? It can run third-party games, got mouse and keyboard, it's got controller. You can carry it on its own, and it's 2 players when you need it to be. It'll plug in under your TV, but that's Nintendo. So like I think it's going to be a really hard thing to pass.
I am excited that this Joy-Con mouse is going to have rumble and it's going to have a speaker built into it. And I think that Nintendo always tries to push the interaction models for their games. You saw it with like the GameCube controller, which I loved. It was such a weird departure from the regular paradigm for controller design. I think that the way that you will see Nintendo integrate these controls and mouse controls in their first party stuff is going to inspire a lot of game designers to get more creative. And I hope that we start to see mice for PC coming with some of the features like rumble built into it and speakers built into it and get a little bit more robust. Bullish on this.
I think the Joy-Cons needed a refresh and to fix some of the issues that were there. It's great. Like when you think about it, like they're such a universal input device. You can pop them out. You can use them as Wii controllers because they're also motion. They've got a mic on it. You can use them as a mouse and you can clip them back together. I think Nintendo kind of hit the perfect console. I think the Switch was the perfect console. So flexible. Like you're saying you mostly played yours docked. To me, it's 50-50 the people I meet that say that, oh, I never played docked. I was just carried around.
Milteam never
that's crazy.
played his Switch docked. I think he said ever. And his dock, like he don't think he ever even unpacked it. Now,
So it's the perfect console for that. It's something for everyone, and on top of that, they've got strong IP. I think everybody's going to be copying it. There's no other way.
And we did see Nintendo release the Switch Lite, right? Which was, I think, it comes in at $299. It's like $100 less, or maybe $199. The Joy-Cons are permanently attached to it. It fills a really nice gap. And I think we could maybe see that here, but the more you make these Joy-Cons an invaluable part of certain games with things like mouse control, the harder it is to create kind of a product line off of a flagship console like this. So that'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
Switch Lite is $200
200, yeah.
Which, like-
Which is what an incredible value for $200.
That's right. It's a shame that you can't plug it in. I always want to, even if you just could, it's weird.
So we know the Switch 1 is a resounding success, and you and I are both major fans of both the console, but what it's done for the industry and how it has impacted the news we're seeing today. But flashback to, I think it was 2015, when the trailer and the announcement played at the Nintendo Direct for the Switch. It was a very hokey, unrealistic depiction of this console. Teenagers popping it in and putting it in their pocket, going skateboarding, setting it up on the table. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen. And I'm curious, when you saw that, did you think this is the revolution that the industry needs and this is going to be a massive success? Or coming off the Wii U, Nintendo is screwed. What are they doing? What was going through your head when you saw that? Do you remember?
I immediately thought that it was a winner. At first, I thought, like, if they can pull this off, which honestly they did, right? You could take off the controllers, you could play 2 players, you could mount it on the desk. And they went in and they said, we can run these games. And the main thing I was worried about is, like, well, are these games going to look that good? So we were a little bit more cautious about it. But the form factor, immediately when I saw it, I thought, like, yeah, that's how you fight. That's how you fight mobile phones and tablets.
Yeah.
You build something that's kind of in the middle that works in all sorts of different ways. And so the docking for me was like, oh, right, they're the Game Boy people and the Super Nintendo people. And now they're showing us that they can do both at once. I had zero doubts that would be the thing that they needed.
I remember talking to you that day because we were working together at the time. I remember watching that and not caring about anything in the entire video except for the new clips of Mario. And I was like, I'm obviously just buying this to play Super Mario Odyssey.
Super Mario.
Cappy, when they
Odyssey
showed that,
was incredible.
Like, I feel a little bit of the same way. It wouldn't have mattered if this console, to me, had a mouse. If Game Chat, if the Joy-Cons were magnetic or a rail. If they show a game that I can only play on a Nintendo console, there's so much nostalgia and love for me, for Nintendo, and what it's meant to me since I was, honestly, 3-4 years old. I'm hooked for life and I'm going to buy it.
Yeah.
When I watch one of these directs, the hardware, for me personally, is second to the first-party titles. And that just speaks to the power of Nintendo's ability to lock down that IP and brings us full circle to why they will can keep charging me $80 or $90 for it.
They keep delivering really great games.
Do you have a hot take on Switch 2?
It's gonna sell. It's gonna sell like crazy. If it's too expensive, they can always drop the price, so you can still buy a $200 Switch if you want, and you'll be able to get a lot of games on that are very good. People still buying like 6-7-year-old games, and they're fine. It can be a thing where you can say, your kids want to Switch 2 and you buy them a Switch 1, and then next year you buy them a Switch 2 and all your games carry over. Super Mario Kart World is going to be the biggest selling game of all time after GTA 6, I think. So I think GTA 6 might come out.
Is it coming to Switch 2? That's the question.
I don't know, but I think it's going to cost us.
It's going to be $100.
At $100.
$99. So I think Switch 2 is going to sell 20 million in the first year. I think that in 18 months, in a year and a half or so, I think we're going to see a price drop and an OLED model, or the equivalent of a Switch 2 Lite. I think that the price is going to be a temporary barrier for a lot of people, and they're going to solve it. And I think this is the beginning of a hybrid console being a permanent trend. And I think we're going to start seeing Microsoft and Sony release their version of it, whether it's licensing to someone like Asus or coming out with their own homemade version. So I'm very excited about what this moment in the industry means, and especially for games. It's going to be one of the big opportunities for us to share our game with a massive audience.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
We're going to jump on a call with the team now.
All right, see you, buddy.
See you later.